The Gamelon warships descended on Earth in a barrage of plasma fire, slaughtering millions before the primitive humans even knew they were under attack. But the lizards would soon learn to their horror that humans aren't as weak as they seem. As cities burned and defense forces crumbled under the alien onslaught, an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council convened. The insectoid, four-armed Councillor Zarx clicked his mandibles in alarm. The Gamelons grow too powerful. With the Zythium crystal amplifying their psionic abilities, they will conquer the galaxy within a cycle unless stopped. A robotic councillor's lights flashed. What can we do? Our combined fleets were decimated in the last battle. We have no weapons that can match their psionic powers. Zarx's compound eyes gleamed. There is one species that might stand a chance against the Gamelons, a primitive race called humans from a backwater planet called Earth. Our observers have studied them. They are adaptable, aggressive, ingenious, traits that may allow them to resist the Gamelons' psionic powers. The council erupted in protests. Primitives against the galaxy's most fearsome warriors, absurd. Zarx slammed a clawed fist on the table, silencing them. We have no choice. If we do not stop the Gamelons now, there will be no free beings left in the galaxy. As the Gamelon ships began bombarding Earth's surface, a cloaked council vessel landed near mercenary Benjamin Campbell's remote cabin. The ex-Special Forces soldier narrowed his eyes at the insectoid alien that emerged. Benjamin Campbell, Zarx said. Your species is in grave danger. The Gamelons will enslave or exterminate you unless you help us fight them. You are humanity's only hope. Campbell nodded grimly, the weight of the galaxy's fate resting on his shoulders. I'll do what needs to be done, he said to Zarx, but I can't do it alone. The mercenary quickly assembled his team of trusted comrades. Maximilian Max Richter, a burly German weapons specialist with a knack for heavy ordnance. Akira Tanaka, a lithe Japanese hacker who could infiltrate any system. And Diego Alvarez, a wisecracking Mexican-American pilot with nerves of steel. Zarx provided the team with advanced alien technology to aid their mission. A sleek stealth ship that could slip past enemy sensors, high-powered energy rifles that could punch through Gamelon armor, personal cloaking devices to render them invisible. Campbell and his crew marveled at the advanced tech, realizing the odds might not be so hopeless after all. As they prepared their gear and plotted a course to Gamelax, Zarx approached with urgent news. There's been a complication, the insectoid said, mandibles clicking rapidly. The Gamelons have captured Zelos, one of our Etherian spies. He has vital intel on secret Gamelon weaknesses and hidden rebel cells. If they break into his mind... Campbell gritted his teeth. We'll get him out before that happens. The team blasted off from Earth, watching their blue marble of a homeworld recede into the void. They made the jump to light speed, racing across the cosmos toward the enemy stronghold. Gamelax loomed before them, a hellish world of churning magma and toxic fumes. Campbell's eyes narrowed as he spotted strange energy signatures dancing across the planet's surface. Looks like they're already juicing themselves up with that crystal, he muttered. A swarm of alien craft blazed toward them, plasma cannons flaring. Diego wrenched the ship into evasive maneuvers as Max charged up the ship's guns. Lances of searing light flashed past the viewport as the team returned fire. Warning lights flashed across the console as smoke started to fill the cabin. We're hit bad, Diego called out, struggling with the controls. We gotta put her down now or we're dust. The ship lurched sickeningly as it knifed into the atmosphere, the ground rushing up to meet them at alarming speed. Campbell gripped his harness, bracing for impact. Metal screamed and spat sparks as the craft bellied across the rocky terrain, skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust and debris. Campbell kicked out the crumpled hatch and stumbled from the wreckage, the rest of the team following suit. Checking everyone for injuries, he glanced at the mangled wreck of their once proud ship. They were stranded on hostile territory, with no easy way out and an impossible mission ahead of them. But Campbell had been in plenty of foxholes before. Slapping a magazine into his rifle, he turned to his team with a cold smile. All right, people, let's move out. We've got a spy to save and some alien ass to kick. Campbell clambered out of the smoking wreckage of the ship, blaster rifle in hand. He scanned the barren terrain of Gamilax, jagged rocks and plumes of acrid smoke rising in the distance. Max emerged beside him, followed by Diego and Akira. Max hefted his heavy plasma cannon with a grin. "Still alive and kicking, boss. Takes more than a rough landing to put me down." "Good, because we've got work to do." Campbell gestured to the nearby cliffs. "Akira, see if you can tap into any local comm chatter, find out where they might be holding the package." The hacker pulled out his datapad and started rapidly typing, brow furrowed in concentration. After a few tense minutes, he looked up with a nod. "I'm picking up transmissions from a Gamelon outpost about 2 clicks northeast of here. Sounds like they've got a high-value prisoner under interrogation. Has to be our Etherian." "The Gamelon outpost," Diego said, checking the charge on his blaster pistol. "Ain't that just dandy, probably crawling with lizards." Campbell checked his rifle's ammo. "Which is why we're going to be smart about this. Max and I will hit their front door, make some noise, draw attention. Akira, you and Diego circle around. See if you can slip in the back and locate the package while they're distracted." "A little smash and grab, huh?" Max said, slapping an oversized magazine into his cannon. "I like it." The team synced up their personal cloaking devices and set out across the inhospitable landscape, the ominous black spires of the Gamelon outpost soon looming in the distance. As they neared the outpost's perimeter, Campbell signaled for Akira and Diego to break off and find another way inside. He and Max approached the main gate, a towering blast door guarded by a squad of Gamelon soldiers in menacing black armor. The lead Gamelon, a scarred brute of a lizard with a lieutenant's insignia on his shoulder, stepped forward with his weapon raised. "Halt! This is a restricted area. Identify yourselves." Campbell glanced at Max with a smirk. "Looks like we found our dance partners." He thumbed his cloak off and leveled his rifle at the Gamelons. "Earth says hello." The humans opened fire, plasma bolts stitching deadly patterns across the Gamelon line. The lizards responded with a hail of return fire, peppering the rocks around Campbell and Max as they dove for cover. Campbell snapped off precise shots, each blast finding its mark in Gamelon flesh. Beside him, Max braced his cannon against a boulder and unleashed a torrent of plasma fire, scything through the enemy ranks like a reaper through wheat. The Gamelon lieutenant snarled orders to his troops, trying to rally them in the face of the humans' devastating fire. But Campbell and Max were relentless, working in perfect tandem to keep the pressure on, thinning the lizards' numbers with ruthless efficiency. Slowly but surely, the din of battle drew more Gamelons out of the outpost to join the fray, just as Campbell had planned. He and Max kept up their deadly onslaught, holding the enemy's attention while Akira and Diego slipped unseen into the depths of the outpost. The two humans crept through the maze-like corridors of the Gamelon base, using Akira's hacked schematic to guide them towards the high-security cell blocks at the heart of the outpost. Pausing at a junction, Akira consulted his datapad and frowned. "We're coming up on the detention center, but it looks like the whole area is locked down tight. I'm picking up some kind of psionic damping field, probably to keep our Etherian friend from using any mind magic to escape." Akira's fingers flew over his datapad. "I can spoof us some clearance to get past the main security checkpoint, but that cell block is on a separate system. I'll need direct access to hack it." Moving quickly, they approached the imposing blast door that sealed off the high-security wing. Akira plugged a data jack into a wall terminal and started rapidly coding, brow furrowed in concentration. After a tense minute, the massive door shuddered and slid open with a hiss. Akira and Diego slipped inside, finding themselves in a dimly lit corridor lined with heavy cell doors, a stark contrast to the utilitarian grey of the rest of the base. At the end of the hall stood a single door, larger and more heavily reinforced than the others, with 2 hulking Gamelon guards posted outside. "I'm guessing that's where they're keeping our guy," Diego whispered, eyeing the guards warily. Akira consulted his datapad again, interfacing with the cell block's control system. "Looks like the Etherians' cell is on a separate security protocol from the others. I can't access it remotely. We're going to have to take out those guards to get at the lock terminal next to the door." The Mexican-American commando crept forward, hugging the shadows until he was just out of sight of the guards. With a deft flick of his wrist, he sent the disc skittering across the floor to land at the Gamilon's feet. The guards had just enough time to glance down in confusion before the disc detonated in a blinding flash and deafening roar, sending them crashing to the ground in a clatter of armor. Alarms began blaring throughout the cell block as Diego and Akira rushed forward to the smoking ruin of the cell door. Akira jacked into the sparking lock terminal and started rapidly hacking, fingers flying across his datapad. Just as the door to the Etherian cell hissed open, a menacing figure emerged from the smoke at the end of the hall. It was a massive Gamilon, clad in ornate black and red armor, with a crackling energy glaive in his clawed hands, Commander Crux himself, Naso's brutal enforcer. "Leaving so soon?" Crux hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "And just when we were starting to have fun with your Etherian friend." Behind him, a squad of elite Gamilon warriors fanned out, their weapons trained on the humans. Diego and Akira found themselves cut off, trapped between the advancing lizards and the sealed cell block. Diego drew his blaster, dropping into a firing crouch. "Akira, grab the package. I'll hold them off." As plasma bolts started to fill the air and the snarls of the Gamilon elites echoed off the walls, Akira dashed into the cell to find Zelos. The Etherian spy was strapped to an interrogation chair, his purple skin mottled with bruises and his eyes hollow with pain. Working quickly, Akira started unfastening the restraints, hauling the barely conscious Etherian to his feet. "Come on, we're getting you out of here. Can you walk?" Daelos nodded weakly, leaning on Akira as they stumbled out of the cell, only to find Diego locked in desperate close-quarters battle with Crux and his elites, blaster fire and energy glaives clashing in a deadly melee. Akira looked desperately for a way out, but the Gamilons had them surrounded. They were trapped, with nowhere to run, and no way to fight past the deadly press of the lizards. Over the din of battle, Akira could only pray that Campbell and Max would reach them in time. Plasma bolts scorched the walls as Diego and Akira fought desperately against the onslaught of Gamilon warriors. Diego's blaster sizzled as he fired shot after shot, dropping lizards with lethal precision. Beside him, Akira grappled with a snarling Gamilon elite, using his augmented strength to hurl the warrior against the wall with a sickening crunch. Zelos slumped against the wall, reached out with his mind trying to confuse the Gamilons, but his telepathic powers, drained by the interrogation, could only manage a weak nudge, barely causing the lizards to stumble. Crux himself lunged at Diego, energy glaive crackling. The human dodged, rolling under the sweeping blade and coming up firing. Crux's armor absorbed the blasts, the commander advancing with a vicious snarl. Just as Crux raised his glaive for a killing blow, a plasma bolt took him in the side, staggering him. Campbell and Max charged into the fray, weapons blazing. Campbell slammed into Crux, knocking the Gamilon back with a vicious rifle butt to the face. The two squared off, circling each other like predators. "You're too late, human," Crux hissed, wiping blood from his split lip. "Nezo already has the crystal. Soon every Gamilon will have the power to crush your pathetic species." Campbell's eyes narrowed. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He lunged, rifle cracking as he used it like a staff, raining blows on Crux's armor. The Gamilon commander fought back savagely, his glaive a blur of crackling energy. Campbell ducked and weaved, landing precise strikes even as the searing blade sliced bleeding furrows across his arms and chest. Around them, the tide turned as the humans rallied. Max's cannon roared, blasting smoking holes in Gamilon armor. Diego and Akira fought in tandem, covering each other as they cut down the remaining warriors. Campbell and Crux battled on, locked in a deadly duel. Crux's glaive sheared Campbell's rifle in two, but the human lunged inside his guard, slamming an armored fist into the Gamilon's throat. Crux staggered, choking, and Campbell pressed his advantage, raining down blows until the commander crashed to the floor out cold. Panting, bloodied, Campbell turned to his team. "Grab Zelos, we're getting the hell out of here." They raced through the outpost's corridors, alarms blaring and red lights flashing, Max and Diego taking point to gun down any Gamelons in their path. At last they burst out into the noxious air of Gamilax, sprinting for the cover of a nearby cave system. Inside the dank caves, the team paused to catch their breath and tend their wounds. Zelos, recovering some of his strength, turned to Campbell with urgent eyes. "We must contact the Resistance," the Etherian said, his mental voice echoing in their minds. "General Vex has been gathering intelligence on Nesso's plans. He knows the location of the Zithium crystal." Campbell nodded, activating his comm. "Zarks, come in. We've got the package, but things are worse than we thought. Neso's already juicing up his whole damn army. We need backup, and we need it yesterday." Zarks' reply came back, his insectoid voice crackling with static. "Negative, Campbell. The Council's forces are engaged on all fronts. We can't spare any ships." Campbell cursed under his breath, but Zarks continued. "However, our intelligence has located a hidden cache of advanced weapons on Gamilax, including an experimental EMP device that could neutralize the Gamelon's psionic amplifier. I'm sending you the coordinates now." Campbell turned to his team, a grim smile on his face. "You heard the bug. Looks like we're going shopping." As the team moved deeper into the caves, following the coordinates to the hidden cache, Campbell's mind raced with the enormity of their mission. An entire army of psionic-boosted Gamelons stood between them and the Zithium crystal. The fate of Earth, of the whole damn galaxy, rested on their shoulders. But as he looked at his team, battered and bloodied but unbroken, he felt a flicker of hope amid the gathering darkness. They were humans. They didn't know how to quit. And one way or another, they'd finish this, no matter the cost. Campbell's team moved out from the caves, following Zarks' coordinates to the hidden weapons cache. The rocky terrain of Gamilax stretched before them, a harsh landscape of jagged cliffs and bubbling lava flows. As they trekked through a narrow canyon, the sound of shuffling feet and hushed whispers caught their attention. Campbell signaled for the team to take cover, weapons at the ready. From around a bend, a group of haggard Gamelons emerged, their scales dull and eyes haunted. They froze at the sight of the humans, fear etched on their faces. Campbell lowered his rifle, stepping forward with hands raised. "Easy there, we're not here to hurt you." One of the Gamelons, an elderly female, stepped forward. "You're humans. What are you doing here?" "We're fighting against Nesso," Campbell said, "trying to stop him before he can enslave the galaxy." The Gamelons murmured among themselves, a mix of hope and disbelief in their voices. A young male, barely more than a hatchling, pushed his way to the front. "Zach," the young Gamelon said, "my father was in the Resistance before Nesso's goons captured him." His voice cracked. "They made us watch as they executed him." Campbell's jaw tightened. He knelt down to look Zach in the eye. "I'm sorry about your father. He was a brave man." Zach met his gaze, something fierce burning in his young eyes. "I want to help you fight Neso. I can show you where the Resistance base is, up in the mountains." Campbell glanced at his team, seeing the same determination mirrored in their faces. He turned back to Zach. "All right, kid, you're in. Let's go give Neso some payback." With Zach leading the way, the group set off into the mountains, the refugees wishing them luck as they disappeared into the winding passes. The climb was treacherous, with narrow ledges and sheer drops threatening to send them tumbling into the abyss below, but Zach navigated the paths with sure-footed ease, guiding them ever higher. At last, they reached a hidden plateau where the entrance to an abandoned Gamelon bunker was set into the cliff face. Zach pointed to a jumble of boulders nearby. "The cache should be hidden under there," he said. The team set to work, heaving aside the heavy rocks to reveal a hidden hatch. Inside they found a treasure trove of advanced alien weaponry, sleek rifles and glowing power cells. And there, nestled among the weapons, was the EMP device Zarks had spoken of. It was a squat, bulky thing, all blinking lights and humming coils. Campbell hefted the device, a grim smile on his face. "This is it. our ticket to shutting down Niso's psionic amplifier. Just then a plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, exploding against the bunker wall. The team whirled, weapons snapping up, to see a squad of Gamilon soldiers emerging from the rocks, led by a sneering officer with a captain's insignia. "Well, well," the captain drawled. "What do we have here, a pack of filthy humans skulking about where they don't belong?" Campbell's eyes narrowed. "Captain Zorak, I presume. I've heard about you. Niso's pet butcher." Zorak's sneer widened. "And you must be the famous Benjamin Campbell, the Council's last desperate gamble." He leveled his plasma rifle. "Surrender now, and I promise your deaths will be quick." Campbell answered with a barrage of blaster fire, his team opening up on the Gamilons. The air filled with the scream of plasma bolts and the stench of ozone. The humans' new weapons proved their worth, punching through Gamilon armor like paper. But Zorak's soldiers gave as good as they got, their own weapons spitting deadly fire. Max howled in pain as a plasma bolt scorched his shoulder, spinning him around. A Gamilon loomed over him, rifle aimed at his head, only to jerk and fall as Zack drilled a shot through his armor, saving Max's life. Campbell and Zorak fought like demons, trading blows and plasma blasts in a deadly dance. Zorak was fast and strong, a product of Gamilon genetic engineering, but Campbell was faster and stronger, his human tenacity an unquantifiable edge. At last, Campbell saw his opening. He lunged forward, knocking Zorak's rifle aside and slamming his armored fist into the Gamilon's face. Bone crunched, and Zorak dropped like a sack of rocks. But even as he fell, the captain's hand darted to his belt, activating a distress beacon. Its shrill wail echoed across the mountains, a clarion call to every Gamilon on the planet. "Shit!" Campbell spat, kicking the beacon away. "Neso knows we're here now. We need to move fast." The team gathered up the EMP device and the rest of the cache, moving swiftly back down the mountain paths. In the distance, they could hear the roar of approaching Gamilon ships. Campbell keyed his comm. The signal scrambled and encrypted. "Zack, how far to the resistance base?" The young Gamilon consulted a handheld navigator, stolen from Zorak's belt. "Not far, a few clicks north through the Xanthrak canyons." Campbell nodded, hefting his rifle. "Then let's not waste any time. Neso's goons will be on us like stink on a Gorgax if we don't get moving." The team pushed on, Zack in the lead, the thunder of Gamilon pursuit growing ever louder behind them. They had the tools they needed now to take the fight to Neso. All that remained was to link up with the Resistance and plan their final strike against the would-be conqueror of the galaxy. But as the towering struts of Gamilon warships appeared over the horizon, Campbell knew their mission was far from over. They were in the belly of the beast now, with the full might of Neso's empire arrayed against them. It would take every ounce of human grit and ingenuity to see this through to the end. And if they failed, if Neso's psionic armies were unleashed upon the stars, then all the courage in the universe wouldn't be enough to save them. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking down to 0 hour. Campbell and his team pushed on through the rugged mountains of Gamilax, following Zack's lead. The young Gamilon moved with sure-footed grace over the treacherous terrain, guiding the humans along narrow ledges and hidden paths. Above, the whine of Gamilon drones echoed off the cliffs as the machines scoured the area for signs of the intruders. Campbell signaled for the team to take cover under an overhang as a patrol craft buzzed overhead, its searchlights probing the shadows. As they waited for the danger to pass, Zelos reached out with his mind, gently brushing against Zack's thoughts. The Etherean's eyes widened as he sensed the depths of the young Gamilon's pain and anger, the loss of his father, a raw wound on his psyche. But beneath that, Zelos felt a steely core of determination, a fierce desire to see Neso brought to justice. Zelos pulled back, nodding to Campbell. "The boy's intentions are true, and I sense there is more to the Resistance's plans than we know. They have been gathering resources, stockpiling weapons. They are preparing for something big." Campbell frowned, his mind racing with the implications. But before he could voice his thoughts, the crack of a plasma rifle split the air. A bolt of searing energy exploded against the rocks near Diego's head, showering the team with molten shards. "Ambush!" Max roared, bringing his cannon to bear on the ridge above. A dozen Gamilon rebels emerged from concealed positions, their weapons trained on the humans. Campbell raised his hands, his rifle held loosely at his side. "Hold your fire, we're not your enemy." The rebels hesitated, their leader stepping forward with a snarl. She was a fierce-looking female, her scales a mottled green and her eyes hard as flint. "Lies! You are NASO's spies, sent to infiltrate the resistance." Zack leaped forward, placing himself between the rebels and the humans. "No, Zara, these are the ones I told you about. The humans who saved me, who fight against Neso." Zara's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking from Zack to Campbell and back again. "You vouch for them, hatchling, with your life." Zack nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I do. They are warriors, Zara. They can help us defeat Neso, I know it." For a long, tense moment, Zara stared at Campbell, her finger tight on the trigger of her rifle. Then, slowly, she lowered the weapon. "Very well. If Zack trusts you, then so shall I. For now." She gestured for the rebels to stand down, then turned to Campbell. "Come, General Vex will want to meet the humans who have caused Neso so much trouble." The rebels led them deeper into the mountains, picking their way through a labyrinth of narrow canyons and hidden valleys. At last, they emerged into a sprawling cavern, its walls lined with makeshift shelters and flickering cook fires. Hundreds of Gamilons milled about, some bearing the scars of battle, others barely old enough to hold a rifle. Zara guided them to a large tent at the center of the cavern, where a tall, battle-scarred Gamilon stood hunched over a holographic map of Gamilax. He looked up as they entered, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight of the humans. "General Vex," Zara said, inclining her head respectfully, "I bring you the human warriors Zack spoke of. They claim to fight against Neso, and they carry strange weapons, unlike any I have seen." Vex stepped forward, his gaze raking over Campbell and his team. "Is this true, human? You fight against the tyrant?" Campbell met the general's gaze unflinchingly. "We do. Neso threatens not just your people, but the entire galaxy. We're here to stop him." Vex snorted. Bold words for a soft skin. "But how do you propose to defeat Neso's psionic armies? Even with the resistance at our back, we cannot hope to match their power." Campbell unslung the EMP device from his back, holding it out for Vex to see. "With this, it's a weapon from the Galactic Council, designed to neutralize psionic energy. If we can get close enough to Neso's amplifier, we can shut it down, and even the odds." Vex's eyes gleamed with sudden hope. "A daring plan, human, but Neso's fortress is heavily guarded and the amplifier chamber is deep within. How do you propose to infiltrate it?" Campbell grinned. "With your help, General. If the resistance can stage a diversion, draw Neso's forces away from the fortress, my team can slip inside and plant the device. We'll need your best warriors to hold the line while we work." Vex studied the holographic map, his clawed fingers tracing over the contours of Neso's stronghold. "It could work," he mused. "The resistance has been preparing for an uprising for months now. With your device, we may finally have a chance." As Zara hurried away, Vex turned back to Campbell. "You and your warriors are welcome here, human. Rest and prepare for the battle to come. Tomorrow, we strike at the heart of Neso's power. Tomorrow, we take back our world." In the days that followed, Campbell and his team trained alongside the Gamilon rebels, sharing their knowledge of human tactics and absorbing the ways of Gamilon warfare. Max, in particular, took young Zack under his wing, teaching the boy the finer points of marksmanship and close-quarters combat. As the hour of the uprising drew near, Campbell couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in his team, in the bonds they had forged with their unlikely allies, humans and Gamilons working side by side to overthrow a tyrant. It was a strange twist of fate, but one that gave him hope for the future. But he knew the real test was yet to come. Neso's fortress loomed on the horizon, a dark spectre of psionic power and advanced technology. To breach its walls and destroy the amplifier would take every ounce of courage and skill they possessed. Campbell checked his rifle for the 100th time, feeling the weight of the EMP device on his back. Beside him, his team made their own final preparations, their faces grim with determination. Vex strode up to them, his armor gleaming in the light of the rising sun. "The diversion is ready," he said. "My warriors will engage Nesso's forces on the plains below the fortress, draw them out into the open. You will have a narrow window to infiltrate the stronghold and reach the amplifier chamber." Campbell nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll get it done, General. One way or another, we'll end this today." Vex clasped Campbell's arm in a warrior's grip. "Fight well, human, and may the ancestors watch over us all." As the sun sank over the jagged peaks of Gamilax, Campbell and his team moved out from the resistance base, their stolen Gamelon armor glinting in the fading light. Zara and Zack walked at their side, along with a dozen battle-hardened Gamelon rebels, their eyes hard with the promise of vengeance against Nesso's tyranny. They approached the towering black spire of Nesso's fortress, its obsidian walls bristling with plasma cannons and psionic barriers. Campbell activated his personal cloaking device, shimmering out of sight, the others following suit. Invisible, they slipped past the patrolling sentries, their boots barely whispering on the rocky ground. At the base of the fortress's outer wall, Akira crouched by a maintenance hatch, his hacking tools already probing its locking mechanism. With a soft beep, the hatch clicked open and the team filed inside, dropping into a dimly lit service tunnel. They moved swiftly through the twisting passageways, guided by the holographic map Akira had pulled from the fortress's security network. Suddenly, a plasma bolt sizzled past Campbell's head. Splashing against the wall in a shower of molten metal, Nesso's personal guard poured into the corridor, their black armor emblazoned with the tyrant's sigil. At their head strode Commander Crux, his eyes blazing with psionic energy, his face twisted into a snarl of rage. "Did you really think you could infiltrate this fortress undetected, humans?" he growled, leveling his plasma rifle. Campbell dove for cover as more plasma bolts filled the air, his team and the Gamelon rebels returning fire. The narrow confines of the tunnel erupted into a brutal close-quarters battle, energy weapons flaring and armored bodies slamming into each other. Zara leaped into the fray, her blades flashing as she carved through Nesso's guards with deadly grace. She spun and ducked, plasma bolts whipping past her as she closed on her foes, leaving a trail of slashed bodies in her wake. Campbell locked eyes with Crux across the melee, the Gamelon commander's face twisted with hate. They lunged at each other, weapons forgotten as they grappled hand to hand, pitting human strength against Gamelon ferocity. Crux hammered his fists into Campbell's armor, denting the stolen plates. But the human gave as good as he got, slamming his knee into the Gamelon's gut and following up with a vicious headbutt that cracked Crux's skull-like helmet. The Gamelon staggered back, shaking his head groggily, and Campbell pressed his advantage. He rained down blows on Crux, each punch backed by the weight of Earth's fate, until at last the commander crumpled to the floor, his armor dented and his face bloody. Around them the battle still raged, but the tide had turned. The humans and their Gamelon allies fought with renewed ferocity, inspired by Campbell's victory over Crux. Slowly but surely, Nesso's guards fell back, their numbers thinning under the relentless onslaught. At last the final guard fell, and an eerie silence descended over the blood-slicked passageway. Campbell stood panting, his armor scorched and battered, but his eyes alight with fierce determination. "We need to keep moving," he said, reloading his rifle. "Nesso will know we're coming now. We don't have much time." The team pushed on, racing through the fortress's labyrinthine corridors, guided by Akira's map. At last they reached a massive blast door, sealed with psionic locks, the entrance to Nesso's inner sanctum. So Akira got to work, his fingers flying over his hacking tools, sweat beading his brow as he strained to bypass the complex security measures. With a hiss of releasing pressure, the blast door slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber dominated by a pulsing column of crimson crystal, the Zythium crystal itself, the source of Nesso's psionic power. But as they stepped into the chamber, a cold laugh echoed from the shadows. Nesso emerged from behind the crystal, his black armor seeming to absorb the light, his eyes burning with malevolent psionic energy. "Welcome, Benjamin Campbell," Neso sneered. "Welcome to the dawn of a new age, the age of the Gamelon Empire with myself as supreme ruler. A shame you will not live to see it." Campbell raised his rifle, his team and the Gamelon rebels falling into battle stances beside him. "Sorry to disappoint you, Neso, but we're not going anywhere until that crystal is nothing but dust." Neso's laughter boomed through the chamber. "You cannot stop what has already begun, human. The Zithium crystal's power is mine to command. Witness the might of the true master of the galaxy." With a roar of unleashed psionic energy, Neso's warriors leaped to the attack, the final battle for the fate of the galaxy erupting in a storm of plasma fire and clashing blades. The chamber erupted into chaos, plasma bolts and psionic blasts crisscrossing the air in a deadly light show. Campbell ducked and weaved, his armor smoking from near misses as he returned fire at Neso's elite warriors. But the Gamelons seemed to anticipate every shot, their minds linked to the crystal, able to deflect the bolts with a thought. One raised his hand, and Campbell's rifle wrenched out of his grip, clattering away across the floor. "Their powers are too strong," Max yelled, his cannon's barrel glowing red-hot as he poured fire at the advancing warriors. Zelos strained, his face contorting with effort, as he projected a shimmering barrier of mental force around the team, the psionic blasts splashing against it like water. "I can't hold them back much longer," he gritted out. Seizing the moment's respite, Diego and Akira broke away, engaging the warriors in close combat to relieve the pressure. Diego's blades flashed, parrying psionic swords, while Akira bobbed and weaved, striking with lightning-fast punches and kicks. Campbell snatched up a fallen Gamelon's energy glaive and charged at Neso, Max laying down covering fire. The Gamelon leader sneered, drawing his own crackling blade. They clashed in a spray of sparks, human fury pitted against psionic might. Campbell moved like a ghost, evading Neso's probing telepathic attacks, his unpredictable human mind difficult to read. He leaped and rolled, his glaive humming as he struck at the Gamelon from unexpected angles. But Neso was a skilled warrior, his blade a whirling wall of fire, countering Campbell's strikes and unleashing psychic barrages in turn that hammered at the human's mind. Beyond them, Zack and Zara darted from pillar to pillar, fixing explosive charges around the base of the crystal's amplifier unit, ducking energy bolts and flying debris. Neso's eyes blazed as he pressed his assault on Campbell, driving the human back with relentless swings and psychic blasts. Campbell gritted his teeth against the onslaught, feeling his strength waning. With a roar, Neso unleashed a massive wave of psionic energy, the shockwave blasting friend and foe alike. Campbell and the others were flung away like rag dolls, slamming into walls and skidding across the floor, momentarily stunned. Neso turned to the crystal, his hands raised in exultation. "Now witness the true power of the Gamelon Empire." The crystal flared, tendrils of crimson light snaking out to envelop the warlord. But Zack leaped from behind a shattered console, the EMP device clutched in his claws. Before Neso could react, the young Gamelon slammed the device against the amplifier unit and thumbed the activator. Neso staggered back, smoke rising from his armor. Around the chamber his warriors collapsed, clutching their heads as their enhanced powers drained away. Campbell surged to his feet, snatching up his glaive. He leaped at Neso, a wordless battle cry on his lips. The Gamelon leader barely raised his blade in time to block the human's furious strike. The pulse of electromagnetic energy erupted from the device, blasting through the chamber in a blinding flash. Campbell shielded his eyes as the shockwave washed over them, the force sending him stumbling back. Around him, Neso and his psionic warriors staggered, their faces contorted in confusion and pain, as their enhanced abilities were ripped away in an instant. Max was the first to recover, his cannon already swinging around to target the nearest Gamelon. "Light 'em up!" he roared, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts that stitched across the warrior's chest, sending him crashing to the ground in a smoking heap. Diego joined in, his rifle cracking as he picked off another Gamilon, the alien's head snapping back in a spray of green blood. The two humans moved in tandem, their weapons flaring as they cut down the disoriented psionic warriors with ruthless efficiency. Across the chamber, Akira and Zara raced towards the pulsing Zythium crystal, the Gamilon rebel's blades flashing as she carved a path through the remaining guards. Akira reached the crystal first, his hands flying over the control panel as he worked to disengage the locking mechanism. Campbell turned to face Neso, the Gamilon leader's eyes burning with hatred as he lunged forward, his energy glaive crackling. The human ducked under the humming blade, feeling the heat of its passage across his face. He countered with a vicious uppercut, his armored fist slamming into Neso's jaw and snapping the Gamilon's head back. Neso staggered, shaking his head groggily but quickly recovered, pressing his attack with a flurry of slashes and thrusts. Campbell met him, blow for blow, his own glaive a blur of motion as he parried and riposted, the two leaders locked in a deadly dance of steel and skill. Around them, the chamber shook and rumbled, the feedback from the destroyed amplifier tearing the fortress apart. Chunks of masonry rained down from the ceiling, exploding into dust and debris as they struck the floor. Sparks cascaded from ruptured power conduits, and gouts of flame burst from shattered machinery. Zelos, his face pale and drawn, staggered to Campbell's side. "We must leave now," the Etherian urged, his mental voice strained. "The fortress is collapsing." Campbell nodded grimly, his glaive locking with Neso's in a shower of sparks. With a grunt of effort, he disengaged and slammed his boot into the Gamilon's chest, sending him tumbling back. "Fall back!" he shouted to his team, his voice barely audible over the din of crumbling metal and stone. Max and Diego, their weapons smoking, began backing towards the exit, covering Akira and Zara as they hauled the glowing Zythium crystal from its housing. Zelos, his telepathic senses straining, guided them through the maze of twisting corridors, the team racing against time as the fortress disintegrated around them. Behind them, Neso surged to his feet, his face contorted with rage. He charged at Campbell, his glaive raised for a killing blow. The human spun to meet him, his own weapon darting out in a lightning-fast strike. The two blades clashed in a blinding flare of energy, the force of the impact sending both warriors staggering back. Campbell recovered first, his glaive sweeping low to take Neso's legs out from under him. The Gamilon crashed to the ground, his weapon skittering away across the rubble-strewn floor. Campbell pounced, his fist hammering into Neso's face once, twice, 3 times, until the Gamilon leader went limp, unconscious. A huge section of the ceiling, weakened by the spreading destruction, suddenly gave way directly over the two combatants. Campbell leaped back, barely avoiding being crushed, as tons of debris thundered down, burying Neso in a pile of twisted metal and shattered stone. Zack appeared at Campbell's side, the young Gamilon's face streaked with grime and sweat, the Zythium crystal clutched tightly to his chest. "We have to go now," he shouted, tugging at the human's arm. Campbell nodded, casting one last look at the pile of rubble that entombed Neso, before turning and racing after his team. They sprinted through the crumbling corridors, dodging falling debris and leaping over gaping chasms torn in the floor. The air was choked with dust and smoke, the heat of raging fires searing their lungs. At last they burst out of the fortress and into the open air, stumbling and coughing. Behind them the massive structure shuddered and groaned, the wail of tortured metal rising to a deafening crescendo. With a final, titanic roar, the fortress collapsed in on itself, imploding in a maelstrom of dust and fire. Campbell and his team staggered away from the destruction, their eyes widening as they took in the scene before them. Across the plain, the resistance forces were routing the last of Neso's army, the Gamilon soldiers throwing down their weapons and surrendering en masse as the realization of their leader's defeat spread like wildfire. Cheers began to rise from the rebel lines, the sound swelling to a triumphant roar as the magnitude of their victory sank in. Campbell felt a grin spreading across his face as he turned to his team, seeing the same elation and relief etched on their weary features. They had done it, Against all odds, they had struck a blow for freedom that would echo across the galaxy. But even as the celebration washed over them, Campbell knew their fight was far from over. Nesso may have been defeated, but there would always be others eager to fill the void left by his fall. The struggle for liberty was a never-ending one, and humanity would have to remain ever vigilant if they hoped to keep the flame of hope alive. For now, though, they could savor this moment of triumph. Campbell reached out and clasped forearms with Max and Diego, pulling them into a rough embrace. Akira and Zara joined in, the humans and Gamilons united in their shared victory. Zack stood to one side, cradling the Zythium crystal, a look of quiet pride on his young face. Campbell turned to Zelos, the Etherean leaning heavily on Zara for support, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Thank you, my friend," Campbell said, clasping the telepath's shoulder. "We couldn't have done it without you." Zelos managed a weak smile. "It is I who should thank you, Benjamin Campbell. You and your team have shown me the true strength of the human spirit. I am honored to have fought alongside you." Campbell nodded, his gaze sweeping over his battered but unbroken team. They had come so far, endured so much, but they had emerged stronger for it. The bonds forged in the heat of battle would not soon be broken. As the smoke from the ruined fortress billowed into the sky, and the cheers of the resistance fighters echoed across the plain, Campbell felt a renewed sense of purpose settling over him. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, but as long as there were those willing to stand against tyranny and oppression, there would always be hope. And Campbell and his team would be there, ready to answer the call, whenever and wherever they were needed. For they were the guardians of liberty, the champions of the downtrodden, the shield and sword of the free peoples of the galaxy. They were human, and they would never stop fighting for what was right. As the dust settled over the ruins of Nesso's fortress, cheers erupted from the Gamilon resistance fighters. They swarmed around Campbell and his team, clapping them on the back and shouting their thanks. Zara embraced Diego, tears of joy streaming down her scaly face. General Vex strode up to Campbell and clasped his hand, his grip firm. "You've done the impossible, human," Vex said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've freed Gamilax from Nesso's tyranny. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Campbell shook his head. "We did what needed to be done for both our peoples." But even as they celebrated their victory, a sense of unease hung over the proceedings. Campbell watched as Zack, the young Gamilon, who had been so instrumental in their success, staggered away from the crowd, his eyes wide and unfocused. Max rushed to the boy's side, concern etched on his face. "Zack, what's wrong?" Zack shook his head, his voice trembling. I don't know, I feel strange, like there's something inside me, trying to claw its way out." Suddenly, a Gamilon rebel screamed, clutching his head. Then another and another. All around them, Gamilons began to convulse, their eyes rolling back in their heads. Zelos, leaning heavily on Akira, his face pale, spoke up. "The destruction of the amplifier. It must have released a massive surge of psionic energy. It's triggering latent abilities in some of the Gamilons." Campbell watched in horror as Zack fell to his knees, a faint blue glow emanating from his eyes. The boy looked up at him, his expression a mix of fear and wonder. "I can feel it," Zack whispered. "The power, it's incredible." In the days that followed, as the Gamilon resistance worked to establish a new government and rebuild their shattered world, the divide between the psionic and non-psionic Gamilons grew. Those with newly awakened abilities found themselves ostracized, feared by their own people. Campbell and his team, now tasked with safeguarding the Zythium crystal, the source of the psionic chaos, found themselves caught in the middle of the growing tensions. They worked tirelessly with General Vex and Zara to maintain the fragile peace, but it was a losing battle. Riots broke out in the streets, psionic Gamilons clashing with their non-psionic brethren. Whispers began to circulate of a new leader, a charismatic figure named Zor, who promised to lead the psionic Gamilons to their rightful place as rulers of the planet. Campbell stood in the makeshift command center, his face grim as he surveyed the reports of unrest pouring in from across Gamilax. Zara, her eyes hard, slammed her fist on the table. "We fought so hard for our freedom," she snarled, "and now we're tearing ourselves apart." Campbell stared at the softly glowing crystal, encased in a containment field at the center of the room. He thought of all the sacrifice, all the blood spilled to keep it out of the wrong hands. And in that moment, he made a decision. Vex and Zara exchanged a glance, then nodded. "It won't be easy," Vex said. "Zor and his followers will try to stop us. They believe the crystal is their birthright, the key to their supremacy." Campbell's jaw tightened. "Then we'll just have to fight our way through them, one last mission to end this once and for all." As they prepared for their final desperate gambit, Campbell pulled Zack aside. The young Gamelan's eyes glowed with barely contained psionic energy, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "I need you to stay here, Zack," Campbell said, his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Help Vex keep the peace while we're gone. The people look up to you. You can be a bridge between the factions." Zack shook his head, his voice fierce. "No, I'm coming with you. I have to see this through, have to make sure the crystal is destroyed. It's the only way I can be free of this curse." Zack nodded, his hand clutching the butt of his plasma pistol. "Understood." As they set out towards the ancient ruins, where the crystal had first been unearthed, Campbell couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that hung over the mission. They were walking into a hornet's nest, he knew, a confrontation with an enemy that wielded the very power they sought to destroy. But there was no turning back now. The fate of Gamalax, of the entire galaxy, rested on their shoulders. They had to see it through, no matter the cost. The ruins loomed before them, a crumbling testament to a long-dead civilization. Campbell and his team moved cautiously through the overgrown streets, Zack at their side, his eyes darting nervously. Suddenly, a bolt of psionic energy slammed into the ground at their feet, sending them diving for cover. Zor emerged from the shadows, flanked by a dozen of his most powerful followers, their eyes glowing with eerie blue light. "Fools," Zor sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can destroy the source of our power? The Zithium crystal belongs to us, to the true inheritors of Gamalax." Campbell raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "It belongs to no one. It's too dangerous, too corrupting. It has to be destroyed, for the good of everyone." Zor laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You humans, always so arrogant, thinking you know what's best for the galaxy, but you're nothing, just pathetic apes stumbling in the dark." With a roar, he unleashed a blast of psionic energy, sending Campbell and his team flying. They crashed to the ground, their weapons clattering away. Zack, his face contorted with rage, leaped at Zor, his own psionic powers flaring to life. The two Gamelons grappled, energy crackling around them, their minds locked in a desperate battle of wills. Campbell staggered to his feet, snatching up his rifle. He took aim at Zor but hesitated, afraid of hitting Zack. The young Gamelon was pouring everything he had into the fight, his body wreathed in psionic flames. With a final desperate cry, Zack unleashed a massive surge of energy, the backlash sending Zor and his followers tumbling away. The young Gamelon slumped to the ground, his chest heaving, his eyes flickering. Campbell rushed to his side, cradling the boy's head in his lap. "Zack, come on, kid, stay with me." Zack smiled weakly, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "It's okay, Ben, I did it. I bought you the time you need. Finish it. Destroy the crystal." With a final shuddering breath, the light faded from Zack's eyes. Campbell bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. Zelos placed a hand on his shoulder, his own eyes glistening. "He made his choice, Ben. He sacrificed himself so that others might live in peace. We have to honor that sacrifice." Campbell nodded, gently laying Zack's body on the ground. He stood, his eyes hard, and turned to face the shattered remains of the Zithium crystal, lying in the dust where it had fallen during the battle. The crystal exploded in a blinding flash of light, a massive psionic shockwave rippling out across the planet. Campbell and his team were thrown back, the energy washing over them like a tidal wave. When the light faded, Campbell struggled to his feet, his head pounding. He looked around, his eyes widening. The Gamelons, Zor and his followers included, were picking themselves up off the ground, their eyes wide with shock and confusion. The blue glow of psionic energy was gone, replaced by a dull, empty stare. Zelos, his face pale, spoke softly. The crystal, its destruction, it's altered the psionic landscape of the entire planet. Everyone is psionic now to some degree. The playing field has been leveled. Campbell stared at the shattered remains of the crystal, a sense of bitter triumph welling up inside him. They had done it. They had destroyed the source of the conflict, the root of the chaos. But at what cost? He knelt beside Zach's body, gently closing the boy's eyes. "I'm sorry, kid, I'm so sorry." Vex and Zara approached, their faces somber. "It's over," Vex said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Gamalax is free, but the price was high." Campbell stood, his shoulders slumped. "It always is, but we have to keep going. We have to make sure their sacrifices weren't in vain." As they boarded their ship, preparing to return to Earth, Campbell couldn't shake the feeling that their victory was a hollow one. They had saved a world, but lost a friend. They had brought peace, but at the cost of innocence. The galaxy had been changed, forever altered by their actions, and as they set course for home, Campbell knew that they would have to live with the consequences of their choices, for better or for worse. It was the burden of being a hero, he supposed, the weight of the galaxy resting on their shoulders. But they would carry it, they had to, for Zach, for Gamalax, for the future, even if it meant sacrificing everything they held dear. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.